Okay, we'll start with this per a tweet from Michael Benson. Devin Haney has now returned to the Ring Magazine pound-for-pound top 10 as Errol Spence Jr. has been removed. It took them over a year's time to make this decision, whereas for the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, Errol Spence Jr. has been ejected from the list as of last year when he lost to Terrence Crawford. The rhyme and the reason for that rule on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list that you don't see on some other pound-for-pound lists is that after a loss, after a fighter suffers a loss, you don't know for sure that they're ever going to compete at that same level again. Some fighters bounce back, some fighters don't. Errol still hasn't. It took Ring Magazine over a year to finally eject Errol Spence Jr. from their pound-for-pound list, whereas on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list, he was ejected that night. He's done absolutely nothing since then to warrant a rank amongst the best pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. I figured that he wouldn't a year ago. Took Ring Magazine a little bit longer, and they have so decided to reintegrate Devin Haney into their pound-for-pound list.
Why?
At the expense of Errol, of course. What's their rationale? What are they thinking? Why did they put Devin Haney back in there? It might be because of the circumstances of the fight. The fight that he had with Ryan. That Ryan didn't actually make the weight. He came in 3 pounds over. He tested positive for a banned substance, and the controversial nature of all of that, it gave him an edge, or maybe they think it gave him an edge. That the outcome of the fight has been officially ruled a no contest. It has been overturned, and technically, at least on paper, Devin is an undefeated fighter. These 3 things may have influenced the editorial panel at Ring Magazine to give Devin a spot on the list.
Get him back on there.
That may have been their school of thought, their rationale.
Is he going to get back on the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list?
No.
Why not?
Because he gave up his WBC title. As I've stated in several videos already, the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list works a little different. There's a governing criteria. A part of that criteria is that you need to be in possession of an alphabet title just to be considered for a rank.
That doesn't even mean you're going to get one.
You have to at least be a champion, a reigning champion in possession of an alphabet title wherever it is you campaign. Though because there are so many champions in the sport of boxing, and not all champions in boxing are created equal, further analysis is required, though at minimum,
yes,
you have to be a champion just to be considered. And Devin is not a champion. He gave up his WBC title. Alberto Puello now has it.
He's WBC champion.
And Devin is on vacation. Figuratively, he's on the comeback trail, because while the powers that be might have overturned the outcome of that fight and ruled it a no contest, and while on paper he may be an unbeaten fighter, I don't know if he's an unbeaten fighter in his own mind. I don't know if he's ever going to be able to compete at the level that he did, which got him on the list. I don't know that. I don't know that moving forward he's going to be the same fighter at, say, 147 that he was at 135.
I don't know that.
He's got to show me. He's got to show me when he comes back. He's got to show me at 147 that he can win a title there, stay in character there. And if he can, he's back on. Though up until he does,
sorry, brah.
no dice. Because the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list is only for winners and only for champions. Reigning champions, not former champions or guys who used to hold a belt. Guys who still have one and are actively defending it. Because that accents who they are and where they are in their careers.
Just imagine
if I told you, here's Fighter A. And Fighter A, where they campaign, don't stand no chance of winning no belt from no one in their division. Doesn't sound like a very good fighter now, does it? Doesn't sound like a pound-for-pound fighter, right?
Right.
Because how could he be a pound-for-pound fighter, one of the best fighters in the world and ranked among them, if he stands next to no chance of winning a belt from somebody at his own weight? So Devin's got to prove that he can still do that he can still compete on that level, and I don't know if he can, because the damage done to him in that fight, well, it may not be on the surface. It could be psychological.
Some guys lose a fight, they're never the same.
I don't think Devin's going back to the 140-pound division. I think when he comes back, he might come back at 147.
Welterweight.
Now ask yourself, What are the odds that Devin Haney wins a title at welterweight? Do you think he would beat Jaron Ennis in a fight?
Do you?
Brian Norman, these are big kids, very big kids, bigger than what he's used to, bigger than the guys that he fought at 135, and bigger even than the guys at 140. Do you think Devin would beat one of them?
Do you think he would beat a Montes Stanionis?
Do you think he would beat Mario Barrios? If Mario Barrios gave him a shot at his belt, would Devin win the fight? Up until he does, it's in the air. None of us know.
He's got to go in there and show it.
Show us. And up until he does, he's not on my list. Ring Magazine can rank him wherever they want. ESPN can do the same. And BoxRec. I don't swear by them. Maybe you do.
I got my own list.
With a governing criteria that structures who goes where, when, and why. And unfortunately for Devin, we don't know here and now that he's one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world. He has to prove that. That's what the fights are for. You can only rate them for the fights that they have, not the ones you imagine.
Sorry, brah.
In men's light heavyweight news, David Morell lets rip at Canelo Alvarez over the Edgar Berlanga fight. David Morell is one of many who is critical of that fight, and he's not going to pour sugar on shit out of respect for Canelo. Even if Canelo is who he is, that doesn't make this a good fight.
Cut the fucking crap already.
Santa Monica, California. Talk about not pulling punches. In addition to the more high-profile exodus of David Benavidez from 168 to light heavyweight, unbeaten Cuban left-hander David Morell, followed by fleeing the division for a light heavyweight debut this Saturday night on the star-studded LA card. On Tuesday, when he was asked what he thought about former undisputed super middleweight champion Canelo Alvarez by passing both Benavidez and Morell in favor of a September 14th date against the far more lightly regarded Edgar Berlanga, Morell delivered honesty.
I expect him to. The whole time that David Morell was WBA regular champion, he was never in the running for a Canelo Alvarez fight. So that as soon as he decides to move up in weight, Edgar Berlanga is installed as the mandatory. He's the WBA's mandatory challenger.
I don't expect David to pull any punches. David who said, man, this fight is bullshit and everybody knows it. I don't want any more questions about this fight. It's crazy, Morell said. The 26-year-old Morell was assigned Serbia's Radovaj Kaladjzic, otherwise known as Hot Rod, for a World Boxing Association secondary light heavyweight title. Morell also took note that Alvarez was stripped of his IBF title last week. Rather than fighting his mandatory challenger via the IBF, Morell's countryman, William Skull, who has been ordered to fight Russia's Vladimir Shishkin instead. It's a business.
It is.
Canelo left two Cuban guys at 168, and before that, Benavidez.
I'm ambivalent. I'm torn. Because I can understand why people would criticize Canelo in this situation, fighting somebody like Edgar, who's done absolutely nothing to get a title shot
Nada.
at 3 alphabet titles.
I understand the way that boxing works, and that if anyone has earned the right to pick and choose, it's Canelo. Though at the same time, none of that makes this a good fight. None of that makes it worth the money. It's a business. Canelo left two Cuban guys at 168, and before that, Benavidez, Morell said, Berlanga is easy for him. Before, he brought a 154-pound champion in Jermel Charlo. Charlo to 168 too. Everybody's here. I'm not talking shit. Everything's here. For me, the fight's bullshit. Asked if he feels Alvarez is ducking Benavidez, Morell said, of course. Benavidez is a great fighter. He's strong. He's not a safe choice, so...
I'm torn. Because I don't think Benavidez is strong.
He's weak.
I don't think Benavidez is a great fighter, and I think if Canelo fought him, he would beat him.
But you know, it really doesn't matter what I think. In the absence of the fight, it doesn't really matter what anyone thinks, because it's the fights that we're all here to see, but not fights like Canelo versus Berlanga. I can't even pretend to be remotely interested in that fight.
I'm sick of talking about it.
David Morell said he's intrigued in fighting Benavidez or whoever emerges from the October 12th undisputed light heavyweight championship bout between unbeaten Russians Artur Beterbiev and Dmitry Bivol. Asked if he also wanted a Canelo fight, he rolled his eyes and laughed in an expression indicating he's not expecting that fight anytime soon. And what I like about David Morell and what I've liked about him, it seems that he read the writing on the wall. He knew he wasn't on Canelo Alvarez's radar, and he wasn't going to waste any time on it.
Smart.
Wasn't anywhere near as gregarious about his move upstairs to 175 as, say, David Benavidez, who didn't hesitate to bring it up and bring up Canelo to start talking about Canelo and criticizing Canelo. No, David Morell read the writing on the wall, he saw what it said, and he decided to move on. It was smart of him not to waste any time on that.
I don't even think he wants to talk about Canelo because what's the goddamn point?
He's fighting Kaladjzic, otherwise known as Hot Rod, this weekend. A very good acid test for a newbie to the weight. And tack on that David Morell doesn't even have that many fights. I think he's at 10 or 11 now.
He doesn't have that many fights.
Doesn't have that many fights or that many rounds. But if this weekend he can look at 175, how he's been looking at 168, against a seasoned guy like Hot Rod, that would be impressive. This lines him up for the winner of Better Beef versus Bivol, and he mentioned wanting to fight David Benavidez in the interim. I think David needs to read the writing on the wall when it comes to that too, because David Benavidez didn't want to fight him before, and I don't think he's going to want to fight him now.
I don't think David Morell is David Benavidez's first, second, or third choice. I don't.
The only way I could see David Benavidez all of a sudden becoming interested in fighting David Morell is if David Morell looks less than spectacular this weekend. If he wins, but he scrapes the win and he doesn't look good doing it, then maybe David Benavidez would want to fight him.
Maybe.
But if he looks good, he looks devastating, how he's been looking, David Benavidez ain't going to be in no hurry to have that fight. Moreover, if David Morell takes care of business this weekend, you know, he already read the writing on the wall when it came to Canelo, and he didn't waste any time on that. Now what he should do is change his decorum, because if you're going to be campaigning as a light heavyweight moving forward, what options do the PBC have for you?
David Benavidez.
And we've been all through the whole David Benavidez thing, the David Benavidez routine. There's no guarantee that if David Morell does the job and looks good doing it this weekend, that David Benavidez will fight him. So he has to think bigger. None of the world titles, none of the 4 alphabet titles are at the PBC. Those titles are split between Top Rank and Matchroom.
At least until October.
If you're David Morell, you want to keep a close eye on the winner of that fight and whoever it is and whoever they're with, because that's where you're going to want to go.
If Artur wins, you go to Top Rank. If Dimitri wins, you go to Matchroom.
Seen a growing number of PBC fighters jump ship all through this year, from the beginning of it to where we are now.
David should too.
What the hell is over there for a light heavyweight at the PBC? Nothing. Goddamn nothing. Just David Benavidez. That's it. That's all.
Fuck it.
If those other fighters had the autonomy to change their decorum and go somewhere else for opportunities, who says that David Morell won't have it? He needs to change his decorum as soon as possible if he wins this weekend. Don't waste any more of your time waiting for David Benavidez to find his balls and fight you.
And don't waste any more of your time waiting for Al Heyman's PBC to sort you out.
Don't even do it. You keep a close eye on whatever happens in October when Dimitri and Artur lock horns. And whoever wins and whoever they're with, that's where you're going to want to go, because that's where all the alphabet titles are going to be.
To get your shot, that's what you might have to do. Unless you want to sit by the phone waiting for David to give you a call.
It's never a good idea to base so much of your own career and your own schedule on a fight that may not happen with a fighter who may or may not fight you. It's just not a good idea. You got to carve out your own lane and do your own thing.
Technically, David Morell has already done that by leaving 168 for 175, but the process isn't complete. He has to change his decorum
to complete the process. So David Morell is not a fan of the Berlanga fight, and as you can imagine, David Benavidez is not a fan of that fight either. He's blasted Canelo Alvarez, saying it's a trash-ass fight. Nobody wants to see that, but at the end of the day, Canelo doesn't face the strongest opposition. And you see that sounds different coming from David Benavidez than David Morell. It sounds different because David Benavidez has been around a lot longer than David Morell. He's had more avenues to beef up his resume and do things than David Morell, who only has a little over 10 or 11 fights. Whereas David, you were literally there at super middleweight long before Canelo even unified that division. You were there long before he got there, through 2.5 cycles of world champions, most of which you didn't fight.
Most? none of which he fought.
None. You didn't fight George Groves. You didn't fight James DeGale. You didn't fight Jose Uzcategui.
You didn't fight Zurdo Ramirez. You didn't fight Billy Joe Saunders.
You didn't fight Callum Smith. You didn't fight Caleb Plant. No, you didn't fight Caleb until after Canelo already beat him and took his title from him. So how can you sit there and say that he doesn't face the strongest opposition when his opposition is better than yours?
By a wide margin.
His first fight at light heavyweight, he took on a reigning champion in Sergey Kovalev. In your first fight at light heavyweight, you took on a former champion who was literally older than Sergey was when Canelo fought him.
Your first fight.
His first fight at light heavyweight, he knocked the guy out even though he was noticeably smaller than Sergey Kovalev, and he's noticeably smaller than you are, whereas in your first fight at light heavyweight, you didn't knock anybody out.
His second fight at light heavyweight, he took on an unbeaten champion in his prime in Dmitry Bivol. What's David Benavidez' second fight at light heavyweight? What's that going to look like? Who's that going to be?
Two things can be true at the same time. It is true that nobody really wants to see Canelo fight Edgar Berlanga. I mean, that's true, but at the same time, you're in no position to talk. His quality of opposition, whatever it is better than yours.
Who's the best guy David Benavidez fought? Who's the best guy he beat? Caleb Plant? The guy he couldn't knock out, but Canelo did, and he did it first?
Wait a minute. You're saying that when David Morrell criticizes Canelo, it's one thing, but when David Benavidez criticizes him, it's another?
Kind of, yeah.
Well, how's that work?
David Morrell doesn't actually want to keep talking about Canelo Alvarez's fight, whereas David Benavidez, he does. He takes every opportunity to blubber on about Canelo.
And it didn't take David Morrell anywhere near as long to move up from super middle to light heavyweight as it's taken David.
Telling you, David was there long before David Morrell came around, long before Canelo moved to that division. David Benavidez was there. But what did he do? What did he accomplish?
So two things can be true. It's true, the Berlanga fight is not a good fight. I don't think it's a good fight, but I don't think David Benavidez is in any position to criticize it because that's literally a fight that he was pursuing all the way back, going all the way back to 2020.
So what, Edgar Berlanga's all right when you want to fight him, but when Canelo wants to fight him, oh, now he's no good.
Now it's trash, but you and that same Edgar, oh, that would have been better?
That's why he's stupid. He sounds stupid.
You're criticizing him for fighting people that you wanted to fight. What, like Jaime Munguia? Like Edgar Berlanga? Those are guys that you wanted to fight.
So enough already.
You're a light heavyweight, you're staying at light heavyweight, shut the fuck up about it already.
Jesus.